The Buddha does not devote many words to a philosophical definition of Nibbana. One reason is that Nibbana, being unconditioned, transcendent, and supramundane, does not easily lend itself to definition in terms of concepts that are inescapably tied to the conditioned, manifest, and mundane. Another is that the Buddha's objective is the practical one of leading beings to release from suffering, and thus his principal approach to the characterization of Nibbana is to inspire the incentive to attain it, and to show what must be done to accomplish this. To show Nibbana as desirable, as the aim of striving, he describes it as the highest bliss, as the supreme state of sublime peace, as the ageless, deathless, and sorrowless, as the supreme security from bondage. To show what must be done to attain Nibbana, to indicate that the goal implies a definite task, he describes it as the stilling of all formations, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion. Sutta 26, section 19. Above all, Nibbana is the cessation of suffering, and for those who seek an end to suffering, such a designation is enough to beckon them towards the path. The way to the cessation of suffering. The fourth noble truth completes the pattern established by the first three truths by revealing the means to eliminate craving and thereby bring an end to suffering. This truth teaches the middle way discovered by the Buddha, the Noble Eightfold Path. 1. Right view, samma ditthi. 2. Right intention, samma sankappa. 3. Right speech, samma vacha. 4. Right action, samma kammanta. 5. Right livelihood, samma ajiva. 6. Right effort, samma vayama. 7. Right mindfulness, samma sati. And 8. Right concentration, samma samadhi. Mentioned countless times throughout the Majjhima Nikāya, the Noble Eightfold Path is explained in detail in 2 full suttas. Sutta 141 gives a factorial analysis of the 8 components of the path using the definitions that are standard in the Pali Canon. Sutta 117 expounds the path from a different angle under the rubric of Noble Right Concentration, with its supports and its requisites. The Buddha there makes the important distinction between the mundane and supramundane stages of the path, defines the first 5 factors for both stages, and shows how the path factors function in unison in the common task of providing an outlet from suffering. Other suttas explore in greater detail individual components of the path. Thus, Sutta 9 provides an in-depth exposition of the right view, Sutta 10 of right mindfulness, Sutta 19 of right intention. Sutta 44, section 11, explains that the 8 factors can be incorporated into 3 aggregates of training. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood make up the aggregate of virtue or moral discipline, sila. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration make up the aggregate of concentration, samadhi. And right view and right intention make up the aggregate of understanding or wisdom, panya. This threefold sequence in turn serves as the basic outline for the gradual training to be discussed later. In the Pali Canon, the practices conducing to Nibbana are often elaborated into a more complex set, comprising 7 groups of intersecting factors. The later tradition designates them the 37 aids to enlightenment, bodhipakkhya dhamma. But the Buddha himself simply speaks of them without a collective name as the things that I have taught you after directly knowing them. Sutta 103, section 3, and Sutta 104, section 5. Towards the end of his life, he stressed to the Sangha that the long duration of his teaching in the world depends upon the accurate preservation of these factors, and their being practiced by his followers in harmony, free from contention. The constituents of this set are as follows: the 4 foundations of mindfulness, satipatthana, the 4 right kinds of striving, sammapadana, the 4 bases for spiritual power, iddhipada, the 5 faculties, indriya, the 5 powers, bala, the 7 enlightenment factors, bojjhanga, the Noble Eightfold Path, Arya Atangika Magga. Each group is defined in full at Sutta 77, sections 15 to 21. As examination will show, most of these groups are simply subdivisions or rearrangements of factors of the Eightfold Path made to highlight different aspects of the practice. Thus, for example, the 4 foundations of mindfulness are an elaboration of right mindfulness, the 4 right kinds of striving an elaboration of right effort. The development of the groups is therefore integral and not sequential. Sutta 118, for example, shows how the practice of the four foundations of mindfulness fulfills the development of the 7 enlightenment factors, and Sutta 149, section 10, states that one engaged in insight meditation on the senses brings to maturity all 37 aids to enlightenment. Factorial analysis of the 37 aids to enlightenment brings to light the central importance of 4 factors among them: energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. From this, a clear picture of the essential practice can be sketched. One begins with a conceptual understanding of the Dhamma and an intention to achieve the goal, the first 2 path factors. Then, out of faith, one accepts the moral discipline regulating speech, action, and livelihood. With virtue as a basis, one energetically applies the mind to cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness. As mindfulness matures, it issues in deepened concentration, and the concentrated mind, by investigation, arrives at wisdom, a penetrative understanding of the principles originally grasped only conceptually. The gradual training. In the Majjhima Nikāya, the Buddha often expounds the practice of the path as a gradual training, which unfolds in stages from the first step to the final goal. This gradual training is a finer subdivision of the threefold division of the path into virtue, concentration, and wisdom. Invariably in the suttas, the sequence on the gradual training is shown to start with the going forth into homelessness and the adoption of the lifestyle of a bhikkhu, a Buddhist monk. This immediately calls attention to the importance of the monastic life in the Buddha's dispensation. In principle, the entire practice of the Noble Eightfold Path is open to people from any mode of life, monastic or lay, and the Buddha confirms that many among his lay followers were accomplished in the Dhamma and had attained the first 3 of the 4 supramundane stages. Suttas 68, sections 18 to 23, and 73, section 9 to 22. The Theravadan position is that lay followers can also attain the 4th stage, arahantship, but having done so, they immediately seek the going forth or pass away. However, the fact remains that the household life inevitably tends to impede the single-hearted quest for deliverance by fostering a multitude of worldly concerns and personal attachments. Hence the Buddha himself went forth into homelessness as the preliminary step in his own noble quest. And after his enlightenment he established the Sangha, the order of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, as the resort for those who wish to devote themselves fully to the practice of his teaching, undeflected by the cares of household life. The main paradigm of the gradual training found in the Majjhima Nikāya is that laid out in Suttas 27 and 51. Alternative versions are also found at Suttas 38, 39, 53, 107, and 125, and some of the more important variations will be briefly noted. The sequence opens with the appearance of a Tathagata in the world and his exposition of the Dharma, hearing which the disciple acquires faith and follows the teacher into homelessness. Having gone forth, he undertakes and observes the rules of discipline that promote the purification of conduct and livelihood. The next 3 steps, contentment, restraint of the sense faculties, and mindfulness and full awareness, are intended to internalize the process of purification, and thereby bridge the transition from virtue to concentration. Alternative versions in Suttas 39, 53, 107, and 125 insert 2 additional steps here: moderation in eating and devotion to wakefulness. The direct training in concentration comes to prominence in the section on the abandonment of the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restless and remorse, and doubt, are the primary obstacles to meditative development, and their removal is therefore essential for the mind to be brought to a state of calm and unification. In the sequence on the gradual training, the overcoming of the hindrances is treated only schematically. Other parts of the canon provide more practical instruction, amplified still more in the commentaries. The passage on the hindrances is graced in Sutta 39 by a series of similes, illustrating the contrast between the bondage imposed by the hindrances and the joyful sense of freedom that is won when they are abandoned. The next stage in the sequence describes the attainment of the jhanas, profound states of concentration in which the mind becomes fully absorbed in its object. The Buddha enumerates 4 jhanas, named simply after their numerical position in the series, each more refined and elevated than its predecessor. The jhanas are always described by the same formulas, which in several suttas, 39, 77, and 119, are augmented by similes of great beauty. Although in the Theravada tradition the jhanas are not regarded as indispensable to the attainment of enlightenment, the Buddha invariably includes them in the full gradual training, because of the contribution they make to the intrinsic perfection of the path, and because the deep concentration they induce provides a solid base for the cultivation of insight. While still mundane, the jhanas are the footsteps of the Tathagata, Sutta 27, sections 19 to 22, and foretokens of the bliss of Nibbana that lies at the training's end. From the fourth jhana, 3 alternative lines of further development become possible. In a number of passages outside the sequence on the gradual training, Suttas 8, 25, 26, 66, and so on, the Buddha mentions 4 meditative states that continue the mental unification established by the jhanas. These states, described as the liberations that are peaceful and immaterial, are, like the jhanas, also mundane. Distinguished from the jhanas by their transcendence of the subtle mental image that forms the object in the jhanas, they are named after their own exalted objects: the base of infinite space, the base of infinite consciousness, the base of no-thingness, and the base of neither perception nor non-perception. In the Pali commentaries, these states came to be called the immaterial or formless jhanas, arupa jhana. A second line of development disclosed by the suttas is the acquisition of supernormal knowledge. The Buddha frequently mentions 6 types as a group, which come to be called the 6 kinds of direct knowledge, chalabhinya. The expression does not occur in the Majjhima. The last of these, the knowledge of the destruction of the taints, is a supramundane and thus properly belongs to the third line of development. But the other 5 are all mundane, products of the extraordinarily powerful degree of mental concentration achieved in the fourth jhana: the supernormal powers, the divine ear, the ability to read the minds of others, the recollection of past lives, and the divine eye. Suttas 6, 73, 77, and 108. The jhanas and the mundane types of direct knowledge by themselves do not issue in enlightenment and liberation. As lofty and peaceful as these attainments are, they can only suppress the defilements that sustain the round of rebirths, but cannot eradicate them. To uproot the defilements at the most fundamental level, and thereby yield the fruits of enlightenment and deliverance, the meditative process must be directed along a third line of development, one which does not necessarily presuppose the former 2. This is the contemplation of things as they actually are, which results in increasingly deeper insights into the nature of existence, and culminates in the final goal, the attainment of arahantship. This line of development is the one the Buddha pursues in the sequence on the gradual training, though he precedes it by descriptions of 2 of the direct knowledges, the recollection of past lives and the divine eye. The 3 together, which figured prominently in the Buddha's own enlightenment, Sutta 4, section 27 to 30, are collectively called the 3 true knowledges, tevijja. Although the first 2 among these are not essential to the realization of arahantship, we may assume that the Buddha includes them here because they reveal the truly vast and profound dimensions of suffering in samsara, and thereby prepare the mind for the penetration of the 4 noble truths in which that suffering is diagnosed and surmounted. The process of contemplation by which the meditator develops insight is not explicitly shown as such in the sequence on the gradual training. It is only implied by the exhibiting of its final fruit, here called the knowledge of the destruction of the taints. The asavas, or taints, are a classification of defilements considered in their role of sustaining the samsaric round. The commentaries derive the word from a root su, meaning to flow. Scholars differ as to whether the flow implied by the prefix a is inward or outward. Hence, some have rendered it as influxes or influences, others as outflows or effluents. A stock passage in the suttas indicates the term's real significance independently of etymology when it describes the asavas as states that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. Sutta 36, section 47, and so on. Thus other translators, bypassing the literal meaning, have rendered it cankas, corruptions, or taints, the latter being the choice of Venerable Nyanamoli. The 3 taints mentioned in the suttas are virtual synonyms for craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, and the ignorance that appears at the head of the formula for dependent origination. When the disciple's mind has been liberated from the taints by the completion of the path of arahantship, he reviews his newly won freedom and roars his lion's roar. Birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Approaches to meditation. The methods of meditation taught by the Buddha in the Pali Canon fall into two broad systems. One is the development of serenity, samatha, which aims at concentration, samadhi. The other is the development of insight, vipassana, which aims at understanding or wisdom, panya. In the Buddha's system of mental training, the role of serenity is subordinated to that of insight because the latter is the crucial instrument needed to uproot the ignorance at the bottom of samsaric bondage. The attainments possible through serenity meditation were known to Indian contemplatives long before the advent of the Buddha. The Buddha himself mastered the two highest stages under his early teachers, but found that, on their own, they only led to higher planes of rebirth, not to genuine enlightenment. Sutta 26, sections 15 to 16. However, because the unification of mind induced by the practice of concentration contributes to clear understanding, the Buddha incorporated the techniques of serenity meditation and the resulting levels of absorption into his own system, treating them as a foundation and preparation for insight, and as a pleasant abiding here and now. The attainments reached by the practice of serenity meditation are, as mentioned in the preceding section, the 8 absorptions, the 4 jhanas and the 4 immaterial states, each of which serves as the basis for the next. Strangely, the suttas do not explicitly prescribe specific meditation subjects as the means for attaining the jhanas, but the commentarial literature such as the Visuddhimagga enables us to make the connections. Among the meditation topics enumerated in the suttas, 8 of the 10 kasinas, Sutta 77, section 24, are recognized as suitable for attaining all 4 jhanas, the last 2 being the respective supports for the first 2 immaterial attainments. The 8 bases for transcendence seem to be a more finely differentiated treatment of meditation on the color kasinas, as are the first 3 of the 8 liberations, Sutta 77, sections 22 to 23. Mindfulness of breathing, to which the Buddha devotes an entire sutta, 118, provides an ever-accessible meditation subject that can be pursued through all 4 jhanas, and also used to develop insight. Another method for attaining the jhanas mentioned in the suttas is the 4 divine abodes, Brahma-vihara, boundless loving-kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, that is, gladness at others' success, and equanimity, Suttas 7 and 40, and so on. Tradition holds the first 3 to be capable of leading to the 3 lower jhanas, the last of inducing the 4th jhana. The immaterial attainments are to be reached by fixing the mind on the specific object of each attainment, infinite space, infinite consciousness, no thingness, and the state that can only be described as neither percipient nor as non-percipient. Whereas in serenity meditation, the meditator attempts to focus upon a single uniform object, abstracted from actual experience, in insight meditation, the endeavor is made to contemplate from a position of detached observation the ever-shifting flux of experience itself, in order to penetrate through to the essential nature of bodily and mental phenomena. The Buddha teaches that the craving and clinging that hold us in bondage are sustained by a network of conceivings, manyita, deluded views, conceits, and suppositions that the mind fabricates by an internal process of mental commentary or proliferation, papancha, and then projects out upon the world, taking them to possess objective validity. The task of insight meditation is to sever our attachments by enabling us to pierce through this net of conceptual projections in order to see things as they really are. To see things as they really are means to see them in terms of the 3 characteristics, as impermanent, as painful or suffering, and as not self. Since the 3 characteristics are closely interlinked, any one of them can be made the main portal for entering the domain of insight. But the Buddha's usual approach is to show all 3 together, impermanence implying suffering, and the 2 in conjunction implying the absence of self. When the noble disciple sees all the factors of being as stamped with these 3 marks, he no longer identifies with them, no longer appropriates them by taking them to be mine, I, or self. Seeing thus, he becomes disenchanted with all formations. When he becomes disenchanted, his lust and attachment fade away, and his mind is liberated from the taints. Instructions for the development of insight in the Majjhima Nikāya, though concise, are many and diverse. The single most important lesson on the practice conducing to insight is the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness, Sutta 10, also found in the Digha Nikāya, with an amplified section on the Four Noble Truths. The sutta sets forth a comprehensive system called Satipatthana, designed to train the mind to see with microscopic precision the true nature of body, feelings, states of mind, and mental objects.